Welcome to this week's BDE. Chuck is back. He had an absence with his prostate issue.
Yeah, dude.
for
How
2
was
weeks.
surgery, bro?
I'm okay.
I already missed the chair.
Chuck was out living life. He was at the Super Bowl. I don't know where you were last week.
Telluride.
Telluride. That's right. Yeah.
So I have a little bit of
We're out
living.
here putting the team on our back, grinding away, making the show happen, and Chuck's out there just jet setting.
Well, I have a little bit of a living my best life story that I'll go ahead and share real quick.
Oh, boy.
So
Let's hear it.
So I call my best friend Fish. And, you know, when you get fired from a private equity firm, usually what they do is they buy you out of your investments, or they at least, if you can't agree on value, they at least freeze so you don't have to make future capital calls. Well, unfortunately, that was not part of my
No,
agreement.
they're making capital calls.
So I had that hanging over my head, you know, as the largest single individual investor in a fund that, you know, if they called all that money, I could have literally been broke. So I've kind of had that hanging over my head the last couple of years. Fortunately, I was able to sell my interest and I got out of it. So I'm talking to my best friend Fish and I said, you know, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just, until my birthday in September, I'm just going to live my best life. And then in September, I'll figure out money. Do I need to get another job?
Love
Do I
it.
need to cut it back or whatever? And Fish looks at me and he goes, dude, don't tell anybody on the planet except me that you haven't been living your best life for the last 3 years. So oops, sorry.
So we carried the team for you though.
No, y'all did. Ratings were only down 37%. I thought they would have been down
I know.
more,
I
but-
mean, this is not ESPN numbers or Walt Disney bullshit. I mean, 37% is okay, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's okay.
I mean, we covered.
that's like 30 people.
Both of them. Your mom and dad didn't watch this week, Chuck. All right, let's jump in. So Pioneer, there was a rumor out that they were buying Range Resources. Pioneer crashed. Range Resources jumped up, I don't know, whatever, 12% or all this. Pioneer actually came out quickly with a denial. Mark, what does this mean? You're a public company guy.
Well, we've seen this before. I think it was a fairly tedious earnings season. That was I think the biggest slug of E&P earnings over last week. So there were quite a few. We've seen rumors pop up, sometimes involving Pioneer in the past. And so, you know, whether this actually goes anywhere or not, who knows, but it does raise some interesting kind of crossroads questions, I guess, as we sit here and talk about where the industry is dealing with capital discipline, returns to shareholders, ESG, maybe portfolio diversification and inventory duration.
Pioneer
issues.
back in the day used to be pretty diverse in their assets, right? In the basins that they operated in.
Yeah, and hopefully
Used to be a problem by some analysts, Mark.
hopefully. So in full context here, I had an earlier career experience of working the Alaska North Slope. So my very Exxon view was that independents didn't belong on the slope because of, you know, the lead times.
What an asshole, man.
Anyway, Pioneer was had pretty wide dispersion for a company its size at the time. They were in South Africa, they were in Tunisia, Argentina, Gabon, some other places, and they had taken this interest on the North Slope. So I think I put in print that they were suffering from strategic ADD and regretted at the moment I hit send on the note. But anyway, they were pretty good sports.
And
about
what
it.
did Mr. Sheffield have to say about that?
That's
He
right.
invited me to the analyst retreat in Cabo.
Oh, nice.
Hey,
There
damn.
you go.
Damn.
Not to be seen ever again, Mark Meyer. But
That's right.
no, but so do you think there was any truth to the rumor? Because at least my experience is a discussion happened in some way, shape, or form of something, and it may not have been going anywhere, but that's kind of been my experience when stuff like this
I feel like in
happens
oil
the
and gas
past.
M&A, there tends to be like the transaction happens. There doesn't tend to be like a lot of pre-rumors. Is that the case in public M&A?
There's a lot of, you know, throwing stuff up against the wall to see what sticks, and, you know, trying to bring ideas forward to management teams. I never worked on the banking side of the house, but my inclination is, or observations were, there's a lot of, hey, this is a good idea no one else has ever thought of, and you know, just more strategic conversations obviously hoping to manifest in a transaction, but
Wide
I've
range.
worked inside it, like for M&A. I mean, being in venture capital, we sometimes report up to the M&A teams. They're always looking at deals, and
Yeah.
it's usually
always.
Sometimes they have a deal that they've always wanted to do, and it just gets shelved until the price of oil comes down, whatever.
Yeah.
And you think about some of these deals. So it doesn't surprise me that they're always looking. And the bankers, they have nothing to do. That's their job, is to freaking promote
Yeah.
acquisition, right?
So I'm going
Right,
to-
Chucky?
Why would Range Resources make sense for Pioneer though? I mean, you have a company that's a pure play gas operator, at least to my knowledge. I don't think that they only operate up in the Marcellus, right?
Yeah. So $2 gas. So arguably you're buying cheap.
Absolutely.
It's going to
Yeah.
get into some, I'm sure Mark's going to talk about just what is actual inventory out there. You know, do you really have 15 years of inventory in the Permian, or is it like, oops, we need to find something else to do? And then, you know, at the end of the day, doing a deal, getting bigger, theoretically, cost of capital goes down, scale, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, and I like to think about things in these kind of bigger picture frameworks. One of which is, okay, and we talked about it last couple of weeks. Do we need to bring Chuck up to speed?
He watches our show.
So, you know, EQT has been playing a pretty explicit long game in LNG. You know, does Pioneer see that as a potential kind of strategic pivot where they need to either establish or reestablish a portfolio position that, you know, places them in the thick middle of that competition? That's a 2 and 2 equals 20, but I think it's something to think about given the dynamics of North American gas markets and what's gone on globally in the midst of this energy crunch of the last couple of years and the role that LNG is going to play.
Absolutely. I mean, look at YL. They promoted to Shell CEO the guy that was running the gas business globally. So I think as I've said, I've been long gas for a while.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak for BDE.
It's the one that sits next to you.
you know. I didn't even eat beans. Well, I did last night.
When I hear
so
Range, I
cheers.
get nostalgic because I had this this money train that I used to have with Range and Hillcorp because they both had bad strings of casing up in the Marcellus. And so I got called all the time to come run these casing patches. And I remember Range got to the point their superintendent was like, Colin, like, we've done these a lot. We've got pretty good at them. Do we really need you up here to run them? And I was like, Dog, why are you trying to take money
Seriously, dude.
out of my pocket?
The other issue is, you know, we've kind of come full circle with the pure play model. That was the by far favorite portfolio construction up until 3 years ago. Big gap between the diversified valuation and all the mainly Permian pure plays, and now that's all, you know, really normalized or has that premium's collapsed. And so, you know, is the go forward something about maybe just a more basin level or geographic diversification of the portfolio? You know, one of the better performers I think throughout all this has been ConocoPhillips. You know, it's a big scale player and it's
Right.
diversified, so it's, you know, it's something to ponder, I guess.
Well, hey, one thing before we leave public companies, though, quick take on folks on this is it's been I've never been a public guy, so I never really read earnings releases, but I've at least tried to and all. Seems like CapEx comes in below expectations, production slightly higher. You get rewarded. The opposite, you're getting penalized. That's what it felt like this season.
Yeah, I think we characterize it as a tightrope, right? And we talked about Devon last week. There was disappointing in the rearview mirror results, and then I think a fairly tepid outlook from a CapEx and you know, what does that provide proportionally in terms of growth, and that gets you punished. Where, you know, whatever shoe's going to drop next. I mean, we've had the kind of salad days of huge cash flows and big outperformance. In fact, last 2 years of outperformance. So it's getting a little more little more tedious, I guess. And there's a big macro backdrop that I think is driving some of this too.
I mean, Mark, how many management teams have survived hey, we don't care about we're not playing the quarterly game, we're playing the long game, and that never seems to work out.
It's like politics. There is no long term in politics,
right?
So
that's right.
Yeah, and I think given how erratic and how volatile the trading has been in the group, you got to be. I used to say in my monthly updates around these issues to LPs, look, all these fundamentals, and we're very principled and very deep on the fundamentals, but you got to respect the trade, and now more so than ever. And so, one follow up comment about Pioneer, I would say that they do have a massive position in the Midland Basin, and so to suggest that there's kind of urgent inventory issues, I guess we'll have to wait.
Yeah.
To see the data. I just think there's very, really disciplined portfolio and CapEx allocation going on right now, and a lot of high grading, which.
Well, and if they don't have inventory, we're all just hosed.
That's
the other thing that's
we just need to put a solar on your roof, and you'll be fine.
The other thing that's been in the middle of all this, at least year to date, we've built DOE inventories like 58 million barrels. It's a lot.
Yeah,
that is a lot.
So makes you a little queasy.
Exactly. All right, Colin, you're a F-150 boy. So the Lightning, a little bit of a negative spotlight by Bloomberg.
Damn.
Class action lawsuit down in Brazil, 11,000 people. Turns out a mine was contaminating the environment. Dirty aluminum. Yikes. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, this isn't just a problem for Ford. This is a problem for every consumer electronic tech company out there. Who was it that was on Joe Rogan's podcast talking about the cobalt mines? And
Siddharth Kara.
Essentially, these large corporations, they think that their supply chains are clean, but what happens at a local level is that you have, whether it's lithium or cobalt, they kind of feed into a larger system. And so from Ford's eyes or Apple's eyes, whoever it may be, they can say, oh, our supply chain's clean and certified. We don't have any artisanal miners or anything like that. But I think that this is a huge risk for a lot of companies about what's actually happening in those mines.
Interestingly, I guess the spotlight has mostly been on, and you read the Bloomberg piece, it's really good. And quite frankly, I was a little surprised
how good it was.
It came from Bloomberg. And Norsk Hydro is actually the ultimate owner of the bauxite alumina refinery in a place called Alunorte, which is a mere 800-mile ride up the Amazon, U-turning in the Atlantic and back down into the refinery port at Alunorte. And so they're doing bauxite processing at high pressures and a lot of caustic chemicals and temperatures and discharges and things related to that. And so, it raises some issues. The litigation couldn't get any traction in Brazil, so they took it to the actually it's going to be, I guess, argued in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So
court of the world.
So here's the deal on this. And this was tinfoil hat maybe 6 to 9 months ago, but I've talked myself into this as true. When you look at the carbon footprint of an internal combustion engine, we know exactly what that is, right? We've been building those for years. We know emission standards, all that. I don't know that we have the greatest handle on electric vehicles and what the actual carbon footprint is. Now, Volvo did something on this, a deep dive, put it on their website, and I'll get this somewhat close because I can't remember it exactly, but it's like the breakover for electric vehicles, depending on your source of generation of the electricity, is like 70,000 to 90,000 miles. So it's not a no-brainer. It's not like, day 3 of it out running around. It's better for the environment and all. So here is my take, and I actually really believe this, is what the government is doing is because the IRA has gone all in on electric vehicles, right? I mean, they have said, we're not going to say we want lower emissions, market, you go figure it out. They've said, we want electric vehicles. They've got to be manufactured here. What this is right now the way we finance the roads is a gasoline tax,
right?
Whatever it is. If we go to electric vehicles, you can't do a gasoline tax. And what they're going to have to do is track how many miles you drill or drive.
Absolutely.
So we will go to a model where it's $1 per mile driven is your tax, because they want a device on your car so they can track us.
They already know there is a device on your car. It's called your phone.
Yeah.
No, well,
that's
that's
true.
what it's not even. That's not even an EV thing. Like my Toyota Camry gas car has that. Like it has a kill switch.
Right.
Where someone can, activate it. If my car's
and by the way,
stolen,
EVs are heavier, so they're worse for the roads.
Like the Lightning is 35% heavier than its comparable.
I didn't get to look into
F-150.
this article, but is Ford being sued?
No.
Ford or
No.
Ford's just the marquee name.
Yeah, they're
And
just
one
the
little interesting twist of
But
it.
I'd
it's the
sue 'em.
actual lithium. It's the miner that's being sued.
So the MRN mine is not owned by Norsk Hydro. Their current license, which they say has 6 to 7 years of reserves left, bauxite reserves. They're currently asking, it's 3 times the size of Manhattan. They're asking for a 1/3 increase, so it would be another Manhattan bolted on. So there's obviously deforestation that goes on, and they just they just mine the bauxite right below the surface, loaded on those vessels, and then haul it over to the refinery. And there's a lot of tailings and runoff, and problem is this stuff's at elevation. Most people live downhill.
But Norsk Hydro is the one being sued here in this lawsuit, which is interesting because I served on a board with some Norsk Hydro executives, and they're Norwegian, and they're seen in Norway as they're clean tech, a clean tech company.
Yeah.
But they actually run their largest aluminum.
Well, here's my thing
refiner
on
in the world.
electric vehicles. I like electric vehicles. I think that they're actually a better product in many cases than internal combustion engines. But to say that they're better for the environment, just kind of, blanket statement, I think is completely off base. And so, you look at things like this, mining happening in South America and in Africa, it's just so out of sight, out of mind for us. But I think that we have to have a really realistic conversation about, hey, is this a better consumer product? One thing I like about EVs, I love the quick acceleration. I love being able to charge in my house. I love, from an environmental perspective, cleaner air quality in large cities. I love less noise pollution. So there's a ton of pros, but is it better for climate?
Well, is it worth the trillions of dollars we're going to spend to make that shift? Or could we do something better with those trillions?
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm all in favor of, if you let the market decide, great, let it decide. But we have basically said trillions. And I'm going to beat my dead horse just real quick, and then Mark, make your point, is I think the electric vehicles, the justification of the $1 per mile on the tax, the routine nature, the normalizing of reporting to the government your traffic is actually a real thing.
That was your original. That's your point.
That's my point, because I know we all have a phone. They've got to go get an order from the judge to be able to look at your phone. Now, that doesn't mean judges won't do that. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying they're going to normalize it, and we're not going to give it a second thought, and the government's going to have, oh, Chuck went here, Chuck went there. That was my point.
A friend of ours is traveling in the Middle East, and they sent a picture of an advertisement that you can get a chip implanted to pay for mobile payments. So it's inside of your skin, and you can scan. I'm like, this is basically where we're going. I'm
sorry. I'm going to be the first one with a Neuralink. I'm going to have ChatGPT inside my brain running circles.
Dude, I would
everyone.
take that for sure. But then the problem is, you already hear voices at night. Now you have real voices talking to you.
That's why I sing to myself. It drowns out the voices.
Chuck's most concerned about his frequency of visits to the Selena Museum.
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
Which we are still scheduled to go, right? Aren't we doing a Selena tour?
One last little interesting point and a bit of an ironic twist on this is that almost 100 years ago, Henry Ford attempted to establish a rubber plantation 150 miles south of this mine site. It failed because they didn't have optimal plantation design, tree production, all that. So
I wish we could bring Henry Ford back. That dude's such a shark. Like, just way
Dude,
ahead of
he
his
was.
time.
Yeah, he thought we needed to have power-backed money and
Yeah.
wanted to do it around the TVA dams.
You know, what's interesting on this whole conversation talking about fuels and power, did y'all see this report come out from Reuters? And I think that this might have actually come out a couple of weeks ago, but I just saw it about this study that was ran on ethanol fuel and how it was worse for the climate than gasoline.
I'm familiar with this article.
Yeah. So I thought this was really interesting. So this was a study, and I don't know how we didn't catch this on last week's BDE, but
Chuck wasn't there.
Yeah. No, Chuck, maybe we weren't carrying the team as well as we thought. But this study was published by the National Academy of Sciences, and I think it was actually executed by the University of Wisconsin, and was funded by National Wildlife Federation and the U.S. Department of Energy. And long story short, what they found is that ethanol is likely at least 24% more carbon intensive than gasoline due to emissions resulting from land use changes to grow corn, along with processing and combustion. And so what's really interesting about this is, one of the assistant scientists on the study, Dr. Tyler Lark, he was quoted as saying, corn ethanol is not a climate-friendly fuel. Now you're starting to have this like infighting because you have Jeff Cooper, the president and CEO of Renewable Fuels Association, the ethanol trade lobby, called the study completely fictional and full of errors, and arguing that the authors used the worst case assumptions and cherry-picked data. And so now you start seeing, scientific community and lobby groups that, I'm sure it was like lobby groups back in the day that were saying ethanol was better biofuels than gasoline. And now it's kind of coming full circle.
Corn does consume disproportionately more anhydrous ammonium fertilizer as well relative to other crops. So there's your natural gas connection.
Shit, man.
I think it's like 70% of the anhydrous ammonia market, but I
can't remember if it was Warren Buffett or Charlie Munger. But one of them says, like, not verbatim, but along the lines of, like, if you think that turning food into fuel is economic or good for the planet, you're an idiot. I think that
no doubt there's some obviousness to that.
Yeah.
Speaking of, when I was inside of the belly of a beast, I really dove into global warming as well, and I really wanted to understand like the math, the real science. But it's like evolution. There's a few pieces in the evolution chain where are unanswered, and they make some big ass guesses. So another story that just hit, we were talking about, is according to NOAA, so it's government data, 0 U.S. warming in 18 years per U.S. Climate Reference Network temp stations. That's no U.S. warming despite 30% of total man-made CO2. Emissions-driven warming is a hoax. What do you think?
So here's my take on this is I really hate when we talk climate change and people say, oh, well, the scientists say this. Because I think in this world, you should be able to see the phenomenon. You need the scientists to say, oh, that's why it happened. But like the apple falls from the tree. Okay, Newton needs to tell us about gravity and explain it to us, but we can all see the apple fall. I have spent an hour and 45 minutes on this, so not a deep dive and all. But if you just look at the temperature over the last 10,000 years, I don't see it in the data.
Who was recording temperature 10,000 years ago?
Well, they say the ice samples. They say the ice samples are accurate. And I haven't deep dived this, so I don't want to like say this really as a statement. It's more just a question, because if you look at it, and I just sat there with a ruler and drew stuff, about 90% of the time it's been warmer than it is right now. So you're kind of like going, okay, well, hydrocarbons have maybe been influencing stuff since what, 1950? Maybe 1900, whatever. Okay. And then I talked to a friend. I've got a friend that's an environmentalist lobbyist, and we always joking, what are your people saying? Well, what do your people say? And her take was, it's actually the rapid rise that's worry. It's not the absolute temperature. It's if you look at the rapid rise. Well, two things come out. One, you always quote 1850, right? Because that was actually the lowest temperature of the last 10,000 years. So why not start at the bottom? But two, the slope of the line, which should be the rapid rise, seems like there are 2 or 3 other times like that in the last 10,000 years where you see a line like that. So I want to deep dive this more because I just don't see it in the data.
Well, this is what I hate about climate. One, you can't ask the questions without being labeled a climate denier, which I don't even know what climate denier means. Like, how do you deny that there's a climate? But there's so much information out there that contradicts.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of noise and really trying to understand, what's good information, what's bad information. And the thing is that science, that science is having an objective opinion to things and trying to understand data, like the whole hurricane thing. You look at it's what everyone's like, hurricanes are becoming more frequent, more intense, but then, yeah, they're not.
But maybe there's another story. So let me throw a story at you and maybe we'll start connecting dots on this climate thing. This is the tagline. European bosses hit easy targets for green bonuses, pay report shows. Top 50 public companies pay out the majority of rewards for carbon emission goals. So maybe there is something else about climate goals for a reason.
Well, I mean, look, we've always known that ESG as a movement is a grift.
Executives are getting rich over this.
Yeah.
Well, the easiest one in E&P that we've seen is, the cessation or elimination of certain big percentages of routine flaring. I mean, routine flaring, in my experience, has been, because of what has transpired or what did transpire kind of willy-nilly, getting out ahead with your drilling and completion and wanting to bring wells online, you're flaring.
Yeah.
Well, that's solvable through better planning and logistics execution. And so how does Exxon cease it immediately? Right.
Yeah.
It's a value product. I just,
I like,
but to finish the point, you're seeing executive compensation get rewarded for, I think, routine flaring, reduction or elimination.
Coley Cavness over at Crusoe, I think, is one of the most well thought out people that I get to talk to. And he's a geologist by background. He's a co-founder of Crusoe Energy, which mines Bitcoin now. And the way that he looks at things from the intersection of energy, economics, climate. And I was hanging out with him one time at one of our events in Austin, and he's like, I look at climate change. He said what you just said. He's like, I look at it, the concern is not overall temperature, but it's the rapid change in temperature. And he's like, I went and studied the geology. And that's where his whole basis of climate comes from, is understanding the rock, which I just thought was super fascinating. But then, I have geologists. I'm not going to say this guy's name out loud. He'd be fucking pissed at me. But he's a geologist, and he's the founder of a climate tech company that gets to really play into that. And I was talking to him one day, and he's like, all this shit in the IPCC report, he's like, there's so much bullshit science in that. And he's just like going off on the science that is used as the foundation. And I was talking to him, I was like, yeah, sometimes I just kind of want to go back to I want to go to university. As one, because I like learning, but two, I hate people coming back at me and saying, no, you're not a scientist. You can't have an opinion on this. And his response was it doesn't fucking matter. He's like, they don't care if you're a scientist. He's like, I'm a scientist. He's like, they don't care about my opinion. And I think that that's dangerous as hell when you have scientists that are afraid to even put their opinion out there because it goes against
the narrative.
So there's something called the Soho Forum, which is a libertarian debate platform. And two scientists that are on polar opposites, Andrew Dessler from Texas A&M and Steve Koonin, who wrote Unsettled, that I think most of you read, debated at the Soho Forum last fall. I think it's worth going to take a look. It's off of embargo and probably has been for a while, available on YouTube. But that's a fascinating conversation and debate.
Both of them are on Joe Rogan's podcast. That's what spurred that
individually,
debate, right?
But they're they're in the same room, and
Yeah.
it gets really interesting.
I think for me, I'm a surfer, so I spend a lot of time in the ocean. And growing up in Galveston, the best beach in the world, because every beach is awesome.
Only if you've never been to another beach, but yeah,
That's why. But I grew up, taking lighter fluid down to the beach, because when you get in the water, you come out with tar. And then you see all this plastic waste. And one of my buddies started a ocean plastic recycling business, an awareness company. The reality is, like, there is a lot of shit, and we do a lot of bad things to the planet that we shouldn't do.
Right.
And that's the reality. I mean, the oil and gas industry gets really sort of everyone looks at them as the bad people. But if you kind of talk to people, including even our friend Mark here from Exxon, who they're the world's worst people on the planet, because they just want to make money and kill everybody.
Yeah.
But that's not But that's not reality. You meet them, they're real people.
Yeah.
They care about the environment.
Well, I mean, this kind of loops back into a story. I don't know if y'all saw this, but Diamondback invested $20 million into a clean fuel company, Verde, which I thought was really interesting that Diamondback was investing in that. I actually saw a funny tweet on Twitter. Someone's like, God damn it, I got to sell my stock now. All this shit loses money.
No, there's some money to be made in the clean fuels.
I was just looking up Verde Clean Fuels because I'm not familiar with them, and they make renewable gasoline. And so they have a technology that turns waste feedstocks, namely biomass, municipal solid waste, and renewable natural gas into gasoline or methanol. And so my assumption here is that
it's good business. I think if you can do it right, especially around California, because of the
So my assumption is that Diamondback is investing into them and probably providing some engineering around methane, and maybe even methane as a feedstock to work with. So,
I mean, I think energy companies in general, in my mind, are like Hollywood. It's like they're banking deals, they're deal makers, and in some ways, I've sort of gone back and forth. Mark, we're talking earlier, and Chuck, about are you a pure play or not? But in some ways, I'm like, man, you're just trying to keep a business and outperform your competitors, and one way to do that is find businesses that perform well. I mean, clean fuels is, people are paying a premium for it.
That's what I've always said about oil and gas when I talk to people on climate. It's like, oil and gas companies are the most capitalistic people you'll ever meet. If they can go make money in renewables or clean fuels, they will.
I've done a few clean fuel deals, and I've looked at probably every one on the market. It's a good business. There's some money to be made if you can actually execute on the technology.
Yeah.
There are buyers out there willing to pay premium.
Well, I think the real question is what's the commercialization timeline?
That's
and
right.
When can you get to scale where it starts to impact or compete with other opportunities in your portfolio? And right now, what we're seeing is a very hyper-intensive focus on return of capital from the core business of the upstream in particular. And, the most recent example of maybe taking a little bit of pause is BP tapping the brakes. Now, they've been the most aggressive in terms of diving headlong and committing big capital today into things like wind and solar, right? So that's got to generate a return. And if
it's not,
it's back to the short-term, long-term conversation. And I think what you're seeing is a response to that ever-growing pressure to catch up from an equity performance standpoint, for example.
You know what Paul Sankey said? He told his wife, 20 some odd years ago, just go buy organics, buy it every time. So that way it becomes the standard and all. And I do feel that vibe these days in terms of like clean fuel, that you're having people just say, go buy it, even if it costs more, because it's the right thing to do. So there might be some critical mass there.
I wish somebody had told me that about coal stocks a couple of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Speaking of clean fuels, the rig count was down 7, biggest drop in a month. It was all oil directed. We didn't see natural gas directed rigs fall off. Sitting there. I mean, we have a 2 handle on natural gas, right? What's going on?
Last I looked, it was closer to 3. So it rallied a little bit. I think it was at 2.25 when we met last week. So I don't know. There's all kinds of noise in the week-to-week number, but Baker Hughes came out last week, and I was just a little surprised to see that out of 7, which was the biggest drop in a month, whatever that really means, we're still at an overall rig activity level of, I think, almost 16% over last year. So my kind of puzzlement is, when are we going to see, if we're going to see the collapse in gas-directed activity, which we haven't seen. It may have something to do with, high-spec rigs are hard to come by. That market's tight. Do they move out of gas-directed drilling into oil-directed drilling? Are there term contracts? Some of these deeper Haynesville wells are longer cycle time. Are operators locked up on term that hasn't rolled off yet? So,
I mean, it would have
a
been
number of reasons. I just think it raises a larger issue of how producers that are, gas focused are going to respond if this persists. Or are they betting on a, not a repeat of this past winter, knowing that.
Well, there was I would have, if I was a CEO, last year, $9 natural gas, it would have been pretty easy to talk me into a 3-year rig contract in the face of inflation, and me going, oh, I can lock my prices for 3 years, and inflation's running at 10%, probably in the oil field it's 25. So it wouldn't surprise me if all those rigs are under long-term contracts, and then you get into what's the break clause, and okay, maybe I'm running in place at 250 or 275 gas, but
it'd be interesting to know if traders trade, they trade barges, and I mean, the traders are always trying to make the markets whole. Do traders trade rigs? That'd be interesting.
No, it's like a bare knuckle fight. You want to cancel the contract.
That's right.
You're threatening to sue each other, and yeah.
By the way, for the show,
or you send a letter to 3,000 oilfield service providers that Aubrey used to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You will drop your prices.
You will.
So we had did y'all see I know Mark saw my TikTok on the Apple iPhone clean energy power. I just told Kirk about it too. I had some guy I was reading my computer. He's kind of pissed off about it. Doesn't think that I'm portraying it accurately, but I am. Fuck him.
Portray away.
So this there's a setting on your iPhone. If you have the new iPhone software update, 16 point whatever, if you go to settings, battery health, there's a toggle switch for clean energy charging. And essentially what this clean energy charging is Apple looks at where you live, the time that you charge your phone, and they try to optimize charging to only charge when there's clean energy available on the grid. I haven't been able to find what that actually means. That's a black box of,
yeah, that's
need to be 30%.
Hard for Apple to figure out based on location.
I wonder in their emissions accounting how much credit they're getting. If any.
That's
executive bonuses, baby.
They're getting some carbon credits for this for sure. But what it ends up doing, I mean, if you look at electricity production in the United States, I mean, 60% of it comes from fossil fuels. Mark's up on
I'm on MISO,
which is all coal and natural gas. He'll never get a charged phone, right? And so what it's caused is you go plug in your phone and you have it plugged in for 4 hours. You go pull it off and it's only 25% charged. And you're like, what the fuck's going on? And so I first saw this on Twitter. Someone posted about it. And then I went and made a TikTok on it. And one of my friends that's in climate tech, he posted about it and he's like, I like to see that Apple is coming out with software and solutions that does that, but I don't agree with making it the default method because all it's going to do is piss people off.
Colin, let me go full circle of where this is going. So let's go back to Chuck's point. So Colin turns off the climate piece. Colin has an EV. Apple and Tesla decide that Colin has wasted too much. He's burned too much carbon last month. You're not going to get charged car nor phone for the next 30 days. They're tracking us. Apple's tracking us. Tesla's tracking us. Eventually, they're going to give you a carbon score.
Yeah.
And if you're not under a certain number, you're not getting charged, bro.
Is this under the umbrella of consequences for social credit scores?
Exactly.
They already do this in Canada. Stacy posted receipts of her power bills, and there's a carbon credit on individuals in Canada, and it's a line item.
And you know what they're
not a
going to
carbon credit, sorry, a carbon tax.
And you know what they're going to do? It's like every freaking time you go above a certain level, they're going to jam that damn U2 album back on us.
Hell yes, they are.
We're hair dropping.
That was like the
U2.
worst U2 album ever.
Now I get why I had to spend another $20. I got sold. I just upgraded to a 14 Pro Max, whatever, and I won't say from what, but I've gone from 2-lens pour to 3-lens.
No, it was like a magnitude. You were like on 4, weren't you? It was like a magnitude
No.
of
There's good news.
There's at least twice that I'm not my dad.
There's good news and bad news about the carbon tax. If you fly public, you're fucked because they can track how much gas you burn.
Yeah.
If you fly private, you're too important. So if you fly private, it doesn't get counted.
Yeah.
So just know that.
The
and
So
you can
I
charge
wondered
on-
why
you
I needed a charge accelerator that I paid $20 for. That the
You do
person
now,
paid
yeah.
you know what I was
test
thinking about?
It's probably related to the green setting.
Yeah, I have a friend up in Boston, and he's very climate. I want to say he's very climate doomsdayer, but he's actually kind of got pragmatic about oil and gas. And anyways, he was posting about how like he could just not believe that there wasn't a winter up in Boston this year, and that scares him. And I was actually thinking about it. I was like, I would much rather be dealing with global warming than global cooling, because humans undoubtedly, I mean, this is factual, that we have much easier of a time surviving in warmer weather than
Ask
we do
your Boston
in cold
guy,
weather.
because I have a house up in the Northeast, is in Nantucket. The 2 or 3 winters ago, the freaking ice in the ocean. I mean, there's
Yeah.
ice everywhere. So I mean, what is he talking? What is he worried about?
But I just find it like funny. I'm like, you don't like summers, bro? Like, you want those cold winters?
Dude,
Like,
I can't help
the-
but staring
to,
at
to
our
that point.
new- have y'all seen this?
oh, is this the Chuck is Jesus?
I mean,
No,
AI.
that's Brad Pitt.
I mean,
Chuck is Brad
this,
Pitt.
is this Chuck's new photo?
I'm
that
sorry,
needs to
but
go
that
in
does not
every
give off
BDE?
the Brad Pitt vibe.
I
That
keep
gives
looking
off-
at it. I'm like, man,
What's the reface?
That gives
guy?
like an even more Western whitewashed version of Jesus.
I can't stop looking at it. It's like you can't stop looking at it.
I wasn't, I wasn't even going
cold.
to attempt to sit in that chair this week.
You know, the irony of the whole thing is that U2 album was actually called Songs of Innocence. And now they're sitting there jamming this back on us.
I want to hit something else
Yep.
real quick related
Lay it on
to
us.
this natural gas and emissions. And EPA reported last week that for 2022, overall power generation related emissions were down 2%, primarily as a result of coal to gas switching. And all the offenders were down across the board, from NOx to SOx to CO2 to mercury. And so, you know, we're seeing another, albeit 1 year data point, where a big shift in the generation stack, natural gas, you know, affecting absolute reduction. And despite the fact that power demand overall in the U.S. was up 2% year over year. So, you know, natural gas doing its thing in terms of at least on the CO2 side, which seems to be front and center, proving again that our longer track record of affecting the substitution has a lot of benefit for absolute emissions reduction.
So we can close the show with 2 nuggets from the energy policy draft. 1, you went number 1 drafting and you took natural gas.
I didn't think it
And-
was going to be $1 though.
Yeah, that's true. But you took it and you made you made a quite eloquent case on why it should be number 1, and I think we all agreed with that. And the other funny thing that applies to what we were talking about today, and Colin, to your point about people wanting summer, David Ramsden Wood said on the policy draft, he said, "Man, if I was Trudeau, I'd put a coal plant on every single corner. I'd raise the temperature of the planet 5 degrees because it might make Canada bearable."
No, 100%. I put out a tweet last week. I said, assuming that humans develop the technology to control atmospheric gas concentration, who gets to determine what the ideal concentration is? Because you got to think, a country like Russia would love to be thought out and have access to
Warm
more
water
natural
port.
resources. Yeah, so you'll never have consensus on what optimal is.
Well, there are net just shy of 200,000 fewer deaths related to cold and heat because of a warming of colder regions, right? So that's all part of this,
Are you saying there's global warming?
Climate-related deaths, have dropped precipitously in the last century, and that's an adaptation thing more than anything. But, cold is much worse for, I didn't know. I think you talked about it several podcasts ago about, you got real hypothermia concerns for the elderly when, things drop to 55 degrees.
Yeah. So
hypothermia is a funny thing because you never think about it, but like the Gulf of Mexico, it's warm water, 70 degrees plus, but if you have to jump off of a ship and you're out in 70-degree plus water, you'll get hypothermia because it's below body temperature, right?
So we used to wear these safety orange Mustang suits when we flew around Prince William Sound, and they weren't immersion suits, so they were not, they were not sealed. And why are they orange? Well, it makes it easier to spot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to bring it all back to me, because that's what I like to do. Telluride, skiing was much more pleasant Sunday afternoon when it was warm, the sun was out, than it was on Saturday. It was cold.
Yeah.
It was nasty. It was rainy, kind of.
Yeah. Can't have the snow without the cold.
Absolutely. So
who do we got for finger of the week?
Mark, you're up.
We're gonna run out of patience with baseball examples, but I was slightly under the weather for unknown reasons this weekend, so I took advantage of the fact that there was actually live spring training baseball being televised, and it was my first experience with the new pitch clock in Major League Baseball, which, with no runners on base, pitcher has to deliver the pitch between the time he receives the ball back from the catcher or the umpire within 15 seconds, or he has to start toward the plate. The batter has to be in the box and set with 8 seconds left on the clock. We actually had a spring training game in the bottom of the ninth decided by a clock violation. And they had the clock within side view of the plate. And I just felt that kind of distraction, anxiety. And I'm the first to tell you that I love the evolution of analytics and data and how it's made the game so much better and much more objective and measurable. But I don't need kind of clock anxiety for America's pastime, right? Which historically has never had a clock.
Well,
right.
And baseball, I'll say this, and I say this with all due respect because I know your love for it, it's boring as shit. This isn't going to help. This isn't going to unboring baseball, but.
Well, that's. I mean, some of these games are lasting barely 2 hours, which is really, really quick.
Yeah.
When the average game last year was 3:18 or something like that, this knocks a good 30, 40 minutes off of it. Oh, wow. Now, think about the commercial impact, revenue impact. You're talking about less sponsorship eyeball time. You're probably reticent to go to the concession because you're going to miss an inning or two if you're a baseball fan. By the way, it is the hardest sport in the world, so.
I play a game. It's called golf, but I argue that it might be a little harder.
Ball doesn't move.
All right.
You're right.
So it's good to have Chuck back. I'm glad he took the time to record with us and grace us with his presence.
No doubt.
We'll be back. We'll be back next week. Episodes, just so you know, we moved from the live format, so episodes will be live Tuesday morning, 6:00. So if you're driving to the office, you're at the gym working out, and you want to hear our beautiful voices in your ear, just check us out. We'll be on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Gents, good hanging out with you. We'll catch
good
y'all.
to have the full crew back.
Yeah, full crew back. We'll catch y'all next week.